Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, I'm super excited to be able to finish the mailbag that we unfortunately had to split across 2 weeks because everybody just had so many great, amazing questions.
Yeah, I guess you can't have too much of a good thing, it seems, as we went over the hour mark and we were less than halfway through. But really excited to get through the rest of these questions. I've been waiting a week for this, thinking about it for a week too. So that'll be gave me some time to ruminate on these a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it did for me as well, especially some of the draft ones, able to kind of go through and look at some prospects in more depth just because I have more time. And with only one game left in the Kraken season, it's really time to start shifting gears and start getting into that off-season mindset and start looking ahead to things like the draft. So definitely looking forward to answering those questions in just a little bit here, RJ. But first, of course, we've got to thank our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor, for sponsoring the podcast like they do each and every week. And, you know, RJ, we're doing this mailbag episode. People are asking us their questions when it relates to the Kraken, something that we could call ourselves experts in, I would say, as a field.
I think so.
And I think most people would agree with that. But you know, if you had questions relating to anything personal injury wise, I wouldn't ask us.
No, I definitely wouldn't ask us. I certainly wouldn't take any advice that we would give. I would hesitate to give any advice aside from, you know, who can give you good advice. I think it's Rico Tessendor.
I was going to say the advice we could give would be to contact the expert, just like you do with your Kraken questions with us. If you ever have a question around any sort of accident or incident, whether it's in the workplace or outside of that, the person to contact is absolutely Rico at 425-778-9800, or to visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. Let the expert be the expert, right? And that is Rico for sure. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. All right.
Although I will say what's cool about Rico too is that if you were to flip it and reverse it, you know, and you wanted to ask him about Kraken stuff,
you could.
I know we are the expert, but he would know a heck of a lot more about the Kraken than we would know about personal injury stuff because he is a regular listener to this podcast.
That is definitely true. That is definitely true. Man of many talents, Rico Tessendor. That is for sure. All right, RJ, let's dive in because based on last week, we probably shouldn't waste too much time.
No, we shouldn't. So let's get right at it. And Dylan, these are for you, okay? I took a lot of the time talking about the big picture roster stuff, the offseason moves, my forte, but I want to dive right into the draft and prospect related questions for you here so you can kind of get going on your specialty. So we'll start off with this one from Sam. Hello, boys. As we near the end of the season, looks like I got 2 out of 5 predictions right from the previous mailbag back in July. I'll try to do better for next season. So again, love you keeping track of that, Sam. Here's 2 questions. I personally love Catton, and I think he's looking like the 3rd best forward of the 2024 draft behind only Celebrini and Demidov. However, in hindsight, do you guys think it was worth passing up a defenseman when it looks like the best player available in our current draft position will be another forward, or another center like forward? So Dylan, I'm really interested to see how that group of 4 defensemen picked right after Berkeley Catton does. We're going to see real soon how guys like Ziv Buium work at the NHL level. But what do you think, Dylan? With a year of hindsight, I don't know. Would you change things?
I mean, I will start off by saying, I also agree that Berkeley Catton has been probably it looks like the 3rd best forward behind those 2 other that were mentioned there in the email. It's an interesting question to pose because you look at some of the defensemen that go after Berkeley Catton: Zane Parekh, Anton Silyev, Sam Dickinson, Ziv Buium. All of them are they're so different. This was really the big conversation around the draft class last year, was with all of these defensemen, and then you throw in Lev Shonov, who obviously went 2nd overall and was the best of that bunch, and then even Carter Yamchuk, who somehow went ahead of Berkeley Catton. I don't understand what Ottawa was doing there. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. Look, I'm kind of at the point where with the Seattle Kraken specifically, I think you just have to go for the player with the most skill. The player is going to be able to go out there and just skill it up over anybody else. And, you know, realistically, Yeah, that's probably Berkeley Catton. So in that sense, I don't know that I would take a defenseman over Berkeley Catton with hindsight, just because Berkeley Catton is he's gone off this year, right? He's been over an assist per game at the WHL level during the regular season, 2 assists per game right now during the current playoff run in Spokane. So I don't know that any of the defensemen are going to be able to match his production just from a vision hockey IQ standpoint. And for me, that's always been the most important thing. I think it's the most important thing on this Kraken team, and what they're needing the most is that creativity out there. And I think Berkeley Catton does bring it. That being said, a couple of these defensemen probably bring that too. I was obviously a huge Sam Dickinson fan. I had him second behind Lev Shonov when I ranked the top 5 defensemen last year. I really enjoyed what Sam Dickinson can do. He's had a huge D+1 year in the OHL. Zane Parekh, I think, is probably the closest to matching Berkeley Catton if you're like going based off of that hockey IQ, just ability to create offense for you. And he is obviously looking fantastic and should be with the Flames next year, and almost made the Flames roster this year, which was really impressive. Then, Ziv Bouyem, who we'll see joining Minnesota here, incredibly unique play style, arguably the most individually skilled of all of those defensemen, but wants to be a power forward out there. I don't know how that's supposed to play at the NHL level from a defenseman, but I do think that the Kraken, given their need for creativity and playmaking, they probably did pick the right guy in Berkeley Catton.
Yeah, and I never have a problem, I think, with going for the highest skilled, highest upside forward on the board. And I always think you should go best player available. But, when that is potentially in question, which at pick 8 of a draft, it often is, there's not always a clear best player available, right? I don't mind going with, the scoring forward. I think that's, with the highest upside, I think that's okay. And I like how Afra really did not like you mentioned even of the Carter Yakimchuk pick there from Ottawa. I'll admit that pick looks pretty rough.
It looks.
That's what she's trying to say.
It made no sense at the time. Yes, I get it. It looked terrible at the time. Makes no sense now. A huge regression. D+1 season is certainly not what you want from somebody that you take 7th overall. Yeah, I don't know what Ottawa was doing. That being said, I guess we should thank them, because it meant that Berkeley Catton was going to be on the board at 8 for the Kraken.
Exactly. Now, speaking of Berkeley Catton, next question here from Daniel, and it's a hypothetical. If possible, would you trade Catton for his Spokane teammate, Andrew Crystal?
Would I trade them like for each other? No.
1 for 1.
Yeah, I would not at all entertain that at all.
Agreed.
I think Berkeley Catton has arguably significantly more upside than Andrew Crystal. I just think that Crystal he's a fantastically skilled offensive player. There's still huge questions around his size. I think, I guess this is what separates them. The Kraken are already talking about Berkeley Catton, getting 9 games next year and giving him a long look through training camp, and him potentially just being a member of the Kraken's roster next season at the NHL level. Crystal's older, and Washington has not really come close to that. That kind of tells you everything you need to know about where they're at as far as, the way an NHL organization would view them. Crystal doesn't play defense at all. Catton does. Catton plays a more important position, being at a center. Crystal's over on the wing. Catton, even though there are size concerns with Catton, there are even larger concerns for Crystal, who is smaller than Berkeley Catton. Crystal is a fantastic WHL player, but huge question marks about what he can be at the NHL level. Whereas with Berkeley Catton, like I just talked about, he has the creativity and the offensive playmaking ability that he is going to produce at the NHL level, right? Will he be a star level player? We'll find out, but he'll actually get the job done at the NHL level. Crystal could just be the next Yamamoto style player, where has good skill, but if he can't fit in the top 6, you're looking at an AHL player.
Yeah, and I think you see that too when you look at just league-wide prospect rankings from various sources, where Catton is often in the top 10, Crystal maybe in the 30 to 40 range, somewhere in there. So Catton has a lot more value as a prospect than Andrew Crystal at this point. So moving from the last draft to the upcoming draft this summer, Sam asks, in regards to the draft, if we don't pick top 4, who's your guy? Personally, if the medical records and combine look good, I want Roger McQueen. I know you'll probably disagree with that one, Dylan. Backup option for me is Anton Frondel, who's your favorite if we don't pick top 4?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I guess I have one favorite, but like medical comes into it, and it's a tough one because you have if you're looking at forward specifically and you're trying to like kind of rank these guys that are going to be available outside that top 4. So forwards that are not Hagens, Misa, or Porter Martone. 3 of the like 4 guys that should be in that conversation next all have significant medical questions that need to be answered through this pre-draft process, and so it's kind of interesting there. I guess I'll start with the one that I feel the best about, although again I don't have access to any of their medicals, so he has arguably the biggest medical concern right now, and that's Carter Bear of the Everett Silvertips. And look, I just think he has top end skill. You look at him, 40 goal scorer this year in Everett, and he had that high end skill level that you'd be looking for if you're the Seattle Kraken. He has an incredible motor. He likes to hit people. He likes to drive the net. I love the way he just kind of dive bombs in there towards the net front whenever there's action there. I think that's something that, again, we've talked about for years now, the Kraken kind of building that mentality and playing that way. I just think Carter Bear plays that way from the beginning. He just looks like that kind of guy that you just know come an NHL postseason is going to be the guy who's able to like step up and score you big goals because of the way he plays. And so that's really intriguing to me. I think he's super interesting, super skilled, great mentality, all of that stuff. Needs, just destroyed his Achilles. And we're looking at a 9 to 12 month timeline for Carter Bear to come back, which means you're losing a significant chunk, if not like all of his D+1 year coming up. And that's on top of just recent surgery and all of that kind of stuff, how that's all going to shake out for him. The last time we saw this happen to like a top 10 for sure prospect, which Carter Bear had definitely worked his way into, who had this similar injury, was actually not that long ago. It was Peyton Krebs, who was projected in like the top 10 for sure, maybe like 6-7 range, kind of like Carter Bear was working his way into. And I think a good playoff run with Everett would have gotten him there for sure. Peyton Krebs, same injury, same surgery, gets drafted at 17, just because it is one where you want to make sure that things look good post surgery. It's a little tougher now. Peyton Krebs got hurt working out postseason. It was like immediately before the draft that he had his injury. Carter Bear is going to have a little bit of time for teams to be able to review how the surgery went, what the medicals look like, and everything on Carter Bear. But it's still like kind of a less than ideal situation. So Carter Bear is my favorite player out of this bunch, but you'd have to be very comfortable taking somebody who's going to lose a lot of time next season due to injury. Looking at the other names up here, Roger McQueen, I'm not high on. I think he's really boring to watch, which I don't think translates. Like if you're boring at the WHL level, I don't know that you're then got the juice to make it as a significant guy at the NHL level as a forward.
6'5".
I know he's 6'5".
Potential impact power forward. What do you think?
I know he's 6'5", but look, he goes for shot volume, but not in like an NHL style shot volume way. It's a lot of like shots from the perimeter and things like that. I know people are enamored with the goal totals that he had. He was a goal per game guy when he got injured and missed most of this year. 40% of his goal production this year, RJ, came in one game. So like obviously scoring 4 goals in one game, that's fantastic. Go back and watch the highlight of that. It was the opening game of the season for the Wheat Kings. He scores 4 goals. One's an empty netter. 2 of the other 3 I don't think are goals against an NHL goaltender. And so I just think that, the numbers and the size look fantastic for Roger McQueen, but when you start breaking down his game, I just don't see it with him all the time. I think he's a project. Could he turn into something? Of course he can, but I think he's more of a project. I don't know that you want that if you're the Kraken right now. Certainly not if you're trying to think on a more accelerated timeline. Anton Frundell, I really enjoy Frundell's game. I'm super into it. I don't really think he's a center anymore. I think he's going to have to be a winger. That's predominantly where he played this year in Sweden as well, was over on the wing, has great size, starting to develop a power forward style game. I think that's really intriguing. I think that's something that would work great for the Kraken. Got injured like 3 times this year though. So you'd have to make sure that as he's developing this more power forward game, as he's starting to use his body more and more, can his body handle it? And that becomes like a major question mark with Frundell. And like that's a really tough one if you're a team, RJ. If you're going to draft a power forward who can't stay healthy, I don't know that you're like super into that. And so then that leads me down to Victor Eklund, who is probably the highest upside. He's the pure skill play. He's tiny, probably weighs like a buck 55 right now, if we're being honest. Extremely small. Probably needs 2 to 3 years to be able to get to the NHL level, similar to his brother. But you look at what his brother can do now at the NHL level, and that skill does translate. And I do think that Victor Eklund is going to be one of those guys that can be, a really good NHL player one day. It's just you're looking at a longer timeline, and you are just banking on pure skill, and you're just going to be looking at like a skilled winger, somebody who's not going to necessarily have size, not going to be able to do too much for you beyond just having that skill. But I'm almost coming around to that. If you're not comfortable with Carter Bear, I almost wonder if you just go with Eklund and you bank on that skill and you bank on that upside over injury concerns with both Frundell and Roger McQueen, and then additionally the playing concerns with Roger McQueen that I have.
It seems like there's definitely trade-offs that you have to make with any of these forwards outside the top
Yeah.
four. I just quickly want to ask you about defensemen, though, given that, I mean, there aren't too many in that range, but just a Jackson Smith or a Radim Murtka, would you consider any of those guys at say 7 or 8 if they fall there?
Murtka, I wouldn't. I think he's too much of a project to kind of be had at that level. Like, you'd have to really be convinced that not only is he going to translate size wise and he's going to start using that size more, but also that the puck skills and everything like that are going to translate, which I'm less sure about, especially comparing him to a Jackson Smith. I think Jackson Smith projects much more like an NHL offensive defenseman. I haven't watched a ton of Smith. That he's like the next guy I have to kind of like do a deep dive on. But it's one where I don't know. I would probably feel more comfortable with one of the forwards.
Okay. And is it safe to say there's nobody realistically in this range that just excites you?
Carter Bear does. Like Carter
Okay.
Bear does genuinely excite me. So like I'm all in on Carter Bear. It's just that when you're talking about an injury that is that significant at this stage, the missed time next year, like I do think Carter Bear was probably further along as far as becoming an NHL player than those other players. So losing his D+1 season doesn't worry me as much as if it was one of the more projects, right? If it was Frundell, Roger McQueen, somebody like that, Victor Eklund, I would be like, okay, you're losing a year that these guys kind of really need. I think Carter Bear was like pretty close to like NHL ready just because of the way he played. It's so prototypical NHL. I think he's able to kind of survive those missed games better than most. But again, it's a significant injury. You can look at Peyton Krebs. He isn't really the same player, right? Like, he has not developed at the NHL level and turned into that guy that looked like a for sure top 10 pick. And so there's concern there for me. But if everybody was healthy, everything being equal, Carter Bear is the one that excites me.
Okay, interesting. And of course, some medical concerns there. And so, as we talk about medical concerns, we'll go to a doctor here. Next question from Dr. Groardbort. With it seeming less likely the Kraken end up with a top 4 pick, what would it take to move from the 6 to 7 range to snag, say, Porter Martone? And would you do it? Would a first, a second, and 2027 first work, or is that too low? So, talking about trading up there, Dylan, since none of these guys seem to excite you aside from a Carter Bear who has plenty of question marks on his own, what would it take, I guess, to move to that top 4 range, and would you do it?
I think the only way that a team is letting you move up into that spot, into a top 4 range, is because they're getting a prospect that they already believe in, and that in some ways, depending on which team it is, it helps accelerate their timeline, right? Boston, they probably want to retool pretty quick. They're probably willing to flip that top 4 pick for a Shane Wright, right? Who's going to be ready to go, can join their roster right away, and they can hit the ground running. But I think that it does involve a prospect that is further along, that's basically borderline NHL ready, if they're not already NHL ready, I think is what it would take for a team up there to go ahead and make that swap. They would, if you're trading that dart throw for a lesser dart throw, you want some part of that equation to be something that is already a known asset in there. And so I think it involves, for me, a high level prospect before you're able to move up into that range.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see a trade just based around picks, to move up like that. And this
And
is
it
why
never happens.
it never happens. Exactly. The last time that a team has traded up or down in the top 10 was 2008. That's a long time ago, and I believe it was for Luke Shen, who's now kind of toward the end of his career. It tells you how long ago it was, but it just does not happen in the NHL. Every year people talk about, well, you could trade up, trade down within the top 10. Never, ever, ever happens.
No, because
So it's not going to happen.
teams know if they're going to be a playoff team or not, usually pretty well in advance. They spend a lot of time scouting on these guys. Their scouting departments fall in love with the guys that they fall in love with. GMs probably do too. You have a very good understanding of what that top 10 is going to be like. It's hard then when you spend a year thinking about having those guys in your organization to then be like, yeah, you know what, I'll actually kind of bounce out of that. Again, unless you know for a fact you're getting something that can help you.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting to think about, but it's just so unlikely that I don't think it's really worth like diving into that possibility because it just hasn't happened since the Bush administration.
Yeah, no, and we know like something like a first and a second, or a couple years from now, first and a second. I mean, that's kind of the price that gets paid to move up or down later in the draft. Like you see even later in the draft how expensive it is to start moving around. Top 10, certainly into the top 5. It's like I said, it does not happen for a reason.
Yeah. So now moving on to this one from Kraken GM. Who do you like with our first this draft and 2 seconds? Please say a giant, mean right-handed defenseman. So I think we already covered the first round pick plenty, talking about everywhere they could go. But anyone in mind with the second round picks? I know it usually takes a little while after the season before you kind of get to do your deep dive into prospects a little further down in the draft. But any names that stand out to you right now?
I was gonna say I don't know that I have names or that I would feel comfortable enough around names to like really like commit myself to them now and get Kraken fans excited for them per se this early, just because I haven't had the chance to look at them all that closely yet, because I'm still just trying to work my way through like the top 10 guys this year, so it's a little difficult to say. I guess I can give like player profiles that I'd be on the lookout for if I'm the Kraken in this spot. I do think you need some more depth along the blue line in the prospect pool, and I think that you have some good guys. Ty Nelson's looking good in Coachella Valley. I like Caden Price. He's somebody that I think doesn't get talked about enough in this organization. You have some other good defensemen, but they're all like third round or later picks, and you're hitting on them in a way that is kind of above what they're already kind of looking better than they should, given where you've been drafting defensemen. So I think it's time to go ahead and start committing some higher up assets to the blue line. Try to find somebody that's going to have more than just like, hey, maybe he can be a second pairing defenseman, right? Like start going for guys that look like more like for sure second pairing defensemen, and then maybe if they develop right, we get some top pairing defensive upside. And so if I'm the Kraken, I absolutely commit one of those picks to a defenseman in the second round if you don't take like a Smith in the first round. And then with the other one, I think, look, you're doing pretty good drafting forwards with size. I would continue that train. I look at Yanni Newman, second round pick, forward with size, obviously has panned out and is doing very well for you. I look at last year, you take Julius Mietinen, forward with size, looks fantastic, is panning out very well for you. I guess even beyond that, just look for a Big Finn who has size and skill and take them in the second round, because that seems to be doing pretty good for this organization.
Yeah, one more commonality between those two. Just take a Big Fin. And you know what? Speaking of the Big Fins, you just brought up Yanni Newman. We'll kind of move into questions about prospects already in the organization. But this one from Legion: does Newman become a full-time player next year, as in no AHL? And we know he looked really impressive in his stint in Seattle, but what are you thinking for Newman as far as next year?
I don't see why he wouldn't, given how long they kept him around this season and how productive he looked. And obviously there's stuff that needs to get worked on and blah blah blah. I don't think that there's any holes in his game that you couldn't just move him down to the third line, maybe even the fourth line if things were really going rough. But really, you have him bounce around in the middle six depending on how he's playing next season, but you let him work through it at the NHL level, you let him figure it out there, and then you can utilize his shot on the power play and 5-on-5 and everywhere because it's just a fantastic shot. But I would be surprised if he didn't make the roster coming out of training camp next season, just because, I mean, if anything, he's going to be a cheap contract to have up there too. Like, it just gives you flexibility there as well.
Yeah, it's going to help from a cap perspective. We talked about this with ELCs coming in and what that's going to allow you to do, especially if you want to try and bring in a star player or somebody as good as you can get that you're going to have to pay a lot of money. You're going to need to get cheaper further down the lineup. I think that's a transition the Kraken already kind of started making this year, with getting rid of a Gordon, a Tanev. That's going to continue with ELC guys coming up to replace them in those spots. And I'm just watching him. I think he's ready to try and work out that stuff at the NHL level. And also, I mean, is he still top 10 in the AHL in goals despite missing all that time with coming to the NHL?
I mean, he just scored 2 more like the other night. So
he might be, I think, but point stands, right? I don't know how much more he can really do at the AHL level at this point. So I think he will be a full-time player next year, assuming he has a good enough training camp. I think he'll have to earn that spot, but I think he will. And then last one on the
tied at 9th, by the way.
Okay, there we go. Still in the top 10. So last one on the prospects here from Dr. Gordbort. For any sneaky good prospects, we aren't discussing enough. So we talk about the top guys all the time, but Dylan, going further down that list, any prospects that maybe a little bit underrated here?
Yeah, I mean, Caden Price is the first one for me. Like I kind of mentioned him earlier in this same vein.
I've been trying since last summer to make him talked about more.
I know nobody wants to talk about him. I don't know why. But Caden Price is a fantastic defenseman in the system for the Seattle Kraken. I'm trying to pull up his numbers here real quick just to kind of show how he's been doing, if Elite Prospects will work with me. But yeah, he's been fantastic this season in the WHL. 43 points in 57 games for him, but he also plays really strong defense and looks fantastic on the back end there. I really just like his style. I think he's going to be somebody that's going to be able to make the NHL one day. Kind of sticking on the blue line again, just because this team seems to do well drafting these blue liners in the third round. Alexis Bernier also having a really strong season and is developing as like an all-around defenseman who, again, you can see playing in the NHL. I'm not saying these guys are going to be munching 25 minutes a night at the NHL, but you can see them being able to play in the NHL, which, given their draft position, is really impressive when you're talking about third round picks in both of their cases. Same thing with Ty Nelson, who does get mentioned more frequently, especially now that he's in Coachella. So I think that's a big one, is just like, look at the way they're drafting and developing these kind of mid-round defensemen is really impressive, and I don't know that it gets the love that it should. Miettinen gets talked about because he's in Everett, but I don't think he probably gets talked about enough. I still think he had the best World Juniors of any of the prospects that the Kraken had go to the World Juniors. I know Berkeley Catton looked good on a disappointing Canadian team, but Miettinen was just so fantastic in that tournament. He really sold me on his ability to be a 3 or 4C for the Kraken organization in the future, and what he can do there. I think he's going to be a big guy on special teams for them too. Just the net front presence that he provides, the way he screens goaltenders is really impressive. Everett's playing right now. Go watch him if you can, because I think you're going to see a lot of if you're a Kraken fan who has wanted certain things from the team in relation to forwards with size and how forwards with size should play hockey, he answers a lot of those questions for you. So I think Miettinen is up there as one of those guys for me. Oscar Fisker Molgaard has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle as he just kind of kept playing in Sweden and kept being part of disappointing Swedish teams in Sweden there, not because of him, but just because of the situation he was in. But now that he's with the Coachella Valley Firebirds, we're going to be able to start to see him more and more. He's already 5 games in, has a pair of points.
First goal the other night.
Yep, has a pair of points, is starting to look good. I still believe in his long-term ability to be just a really dominant, fun, exciting bottom six forward, whether he's at center as like a 4C or maybe even as a third line winger. I just think the energy that he plays with, the defensive responsibility he plays with, he can be that next guy in the vein of Brandon Tanev, Mikey Asimont, whatever it is that you want to talk about as that exciting bottom six guy that everybody can kind of fall in love with and is going to really kind of give you value beyond what, guys in that spot should give you. And so I'm excited about him. And like I said, we haven't heard his name so much in the last couple of years, but he's still around, and we'll probably hear his name a lot more now that he's in North America.
I know you were excited about him from, I think, even before he was drafted, right? Wasn't he somebody that you were saying the Kraken maybe should target? So always fun to see those guys come along and finally be in North America. That's going to be fun too. So thank you, Dylan, for really doing the heavy lifting on those prospect and draft questions. Always look forward to those. And I'm sure you'll have a lot more as we get close to the draft in the summer and everything. You're going to do your research as you always do, and we'll get that former scouts take from you for sure. So moving on to some questions that actually relate to other teams, but they're Kraken related. But this one, we'll start off with this one from Four Horsemen with the Kraken actually recently having played the Golden Knights. I think this question should be in consideration because the Vegas Golden Knights are in the same division. RJ loves them, which I wouldn't say I love them, but thank you for
you sure pump their tires a lot, RJ.
Well, yeah, I might pump their tires a little bit more later, but go ahead.
I was gonna say, look, it is a joke that you love them, but I mean, look, they've done a lot as an organization that I think fans of other fan bases should kind of look at them and be like, hey, why can't my team do that?
Exactly. And that's kind of how I feel about it. So I'll get to the rest of the question here, but I was curious to hear your take on the Golden Knights salary cap distribution and how they spend money. I just returned from one of their games, and it's surprising that they always have the salary cap space to fit in a Noah Hanifin, Tomas Hertl. When those trades pop up, they seem to be in play for everybody, whereas other teams can never quite make the salary cap work. Is it they always give themselves enough flexibility to work with, or that they get rid of players at the same rate? Or is it all just LTIR shenanigans? Maybe in short, how different is their salary cap spend distribution versus that of the Kraken? And so Vegas operates in a way that's pretty different, I'd say, from a lot of NHL teams, certainly very different from the Kraken. And I think really what allows them to do this is that I think they basically try and keep a steady stream of players that are kind of in their prime, 26 to 32 years old. And they always have this philosophy, and I believe it applies to their players. I think it applies to their coaches. Basically, if we can get somebody even 1% better, we're going to do that. We're going to replace you. If we can get, for players, if we can get somebody younger or cheaper, we're going to do that, and you're out. And that's ultimately, where I think that approach, I think they take it too far sometimes. But I do respect that they're willing to kind of go in on that approach. If you look at the way I like to think about it too is, if you look at it on a scale of just accountability for performance, and every NHL team, I think, would fall on this scale somewhere from 1 to 10. Vegas is a 10, being like most accountability for performance. If you have one bad season, they will get rid of you. If you have one great season with Marc-Andre Fleury, look at, I think that's the ultimate example. He wins the Vezina Trophy as best goalie in the NHL. He's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. They get rid of him for nothing. They trade him essentially for nothing, because they can go in and get a goalie, Robin Lehner, who's, like 8 years younger. They are willing to do that and make that bet. Now, I don't like the way they handled it. I mean, first of all, not telling Fleury ahead of time. I think you can make that move and still make that decision and still kind of be classy toward a Marc-Andre Fleury and how you do it, but they don't do either. So I don't like that about them. But you have the Vegas at a 10 on that scale. I think Seattle's probably a 2. As far as just how much accountability for performance for the players. And I would like to see Seattle at least move towards where Vegas is. I don't want to see them at a 10 because that's just very ruthless, but I think they've got a lot of room to move in that direction. And so I look at specific differences because you talk about the salary cap and kind of how the players are distributed from the Kraken. I think the big thing is Vegas, they don't overpay free agents or for player acquisition. That is huge. And we know the Kraken do overpay, but I think for Vegas, one thing that allows them to do that is because, three things really. They're winning. They have a winning culture. They win. They're a nice place to live, and no state income tax. I think those three things help a lot. Kraken check maybe 1.5 of those boxes. I think really they've got the no state income tax, which is probably the least important of those boxes, and they're a pretty nice place to live. Again, look, there's nowhere in the world I'd rather live than Seattle. But I don't know that like NHL players would say that. They might rather have the heat of Vegas any day, but they're able to use that as kind of leverage, right? For when players want to come to the team, but you can also do that when you have a winning environment as well. And I think the biggest thing as far as their roster construction is they have 2 star forwards, both of whom they traded for. And I think that is the key. They were bold, they were aggressive, and they made those deals when they were available. You trade for Jack Eichel, what's the word? Damaged goods, right? I mean, this is a distressed asset with his neck. No one knew if he'd be the same, but they're bold. They make that trade, really get him for pennies on the dollar. And that's your number 1 center. And as we've talked about, having a star forward, a number 1 center like that is the most valuable piece you can possibly have. And they do not win a Stanley Cup without him. So they make that trade. And then Mark Stone also, they trade away, one of their top prospects in Eric Brandstrom to go get Mark Stone. They sign him. I believe it was like part of a sign and trade type of thing. But you go take a chance on somebody like that. And the Kraken are simply not as aggressive in making moves like that. I mean, Jack Eichel was on the table. The Kraken probably could have gotten that done. As far as I know, they had zero interest in doing that. And they're not the only team that probably regrets not being involved in a deal like that, but they're one of them. And so I think Vegas is bold. They're aggressive, and they don't always hit too. I mean, we forget the moves that don't always work out as well. They traded a first, a second, and a third round pick for Tomas Tatar.
Crazy return that was.
Yeah. So they don't always hit, but they're aggressive and they keep at it. And overall, all it takes is hitting more often than you miss. Like with it, you hit on a Jack Eichel, you can afford 3 or 4 misses. Even the Fleury thing was a miss, right? Robin Lehner, they were kind of lucky they were able to LTIR that one away, but like that wasn't a good move. That ended up not being good, but they take the risks. They deal with what comes of it. And I just think they have accountability and a culture of winning and just a commitment to excellence in that organization where they don't put up with guys underperforming. They don't put up with a lack of results. And it's something that I think more teams could emulate.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where just to make an analogy, because you nailed all the everything that there is to be said about how they operate and the moves that they make. Just to like put it in an analogy form, they're like the company that is like the ultra aggressive, ruthless capitalist company, right? Where it's the only thing that matters is making money. For them, the only thing that matters for them is winning. They do not care about anything else, and whatever has to happen along the way to make them a winner, they're just going to do. And they will throw anybody under the bus that they need to make that happen. They'll get rid of, you gave 45 years of great service to this company. Guess what? You're gone, right? Like, we don't care. They're that company that does that. And, similar to how in a capitalist society that can be rewarded and is one of the unfortunately proven ways to have some success. It's the same thing in the NHL. Like, when your only focus is winning and you're going to make any decision that comes along that for other teams is going to be a tough decision, and for you it's just, does this help us win, yes or no, and you're able just to make that decision, you end up in the spot that Vegas is in, where there's not a lot of player loyalty. Players are going to badmouth you after they're gone. They're going to feel mistreated by you at times, and players certainly have, but you're winning. And in sports, that's the name of the game at the end of the day. That's what, players on your current roster, that's all they're going to care about. And Vegas's fans are certainly proving that's what fan bases care about, right? Yeah, it sucks. You invested a bunch of money in a jersey. You love Marc-Andre Fleury. You love a Jonathan Marchessault. You love these guys, and they can be gone at the drop of a hat. But you know what? You still want to see your team compete for a Stanley Cup every year, right? Like, that's ultimately kind of what fans want, is to be winners. And that's what Vegas does.
Yeah. And at a certain level, I feel like I have to respect it just because the results they've gotten. And from day one, that was kind of always the plan too. I like how Bill Foley and ownership set concrete expectations for what the standard of success was from the very beginning. And he certainly didn't expect them to make the Cup final year one. And
Nobody did.
He was, nobody did. But he talked about year 6. We want to win a Stanley Cup, and that is setting a solid expectation for success and a solid timeline, which I really respect that. And I don't think we've ever had anything like that from the Kraken. There has never been a solid answering of the question of what is the standard for success and what is the timeline to achieve that standard. And so that's where I think the Kraken kind of move toward Vegas. Doesn't have to be all the way cranked up to 11. Really, I think Vegas maybe is an 11
They are,
in a scale of 10. But I think there's a lot of room to move towards that. So good question there for Horseman. I was definitely eager to talk about that one. And then last question on the other teams, Dylan. And this is a fun one too. I enjoyed thinking about this. Who are your 3 favorite players to watch in the league right now who are not Kraken?
Yeah, this was a really fun question. I was gonna say, because I knew your list ahead of time, so I don't know if you want to go first with your list, and then
I'll go ahead.
I could say my list, but yeah.
So I was trying to think about some names. The way I approached this list is that I didn't want to just go all top skill guys high end. I included Connor McDavid. It's Connor McDavid number 1. And I feel like this doesn't really require much of an explanation. If you've watched him play, you know the incredible things he can do. And every time he's on the ice, I'm just like, I'm amazed. So McDavid number 1, I couldn't not include him. Then I tried to go a little more off the board because like there are some guys like Cale Makar, same reason as McDavid. Like I think he's fantastic, but I didn't include him on the list. I could put like Jack Eichel there for the same reasons, but I went number 2, Brent Burns, because and yes, there's a little bit of Sharks fan bias here, but I'm telling you, man, when he is at his peak, nobody is more entertaining to watch because he is an athletic freak. Like 6'5", big defenseman, can lay a big hit, can make a skill play. I mean, he played forward for a whole season. And also he does everything just so chaotically. I love that about him is it's just chaos all the time. He will dive down to block a pass across. He will lunge to set up a big hip check. The way he keeps the puck in at the point, he will throw himself at the boards and at the glass to try and keep a puck in when it's being cleared around the glass. Like I just love everything about the way Brent Burns plays. And even at age, is he 40 yet or is he still 39? But
he's up there. I was just going to say this is my one question with you.
Yes.
Is, you say at his peak, he is these things. Is he still at his peak? Like if you're someone who's new to the NHL, who didn't grow up watching him and didn't see him, 10 years ago, really, right? When he was in his prime, are you going to see all of those same things now with him?
You're going to see, I think, like 80% of it. You're going to see the same type of things. I mean, hey, he's still playing over 21 minutes a night.
No, he is. No,
he's still munching major minutes.
Fantastic player, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to see him throwing himself at pucks every single place on the ice. The one thing you're not going to see, I think, is the point production, the incredible shot. I mean, he had a 29 goal season back in 16-17, like where he won the Norris. You're not going to see that, but I think you're going to see enough of it that you'll understand kind of what peak Brent Burns was.
Yeah.
And then number 3 on my list, and I wanted to go with somebody a little bit younger and a forward, just somebody who I always talk about. I was trying to think, who do I like talk Dylan's ear off the most about when they come to Seattle and play, and it's Matt Boldy. I really enjoy the way he plays, the mix of size and skill. And it seems like he's kind of a Kraken killer too. It seems like he always does something when we watch him against Seattle. And I don't, just something about the way he plays. I'm all for it. And like, let's see. I mean, he's maxed out this season at 71 points. Like he's not even a point per game guy yet, but the way he can kind of take over a shift is something I really enjoy watching. It seems like he does that at least a couple shifts every game.
And clutch goals too. Like, like there's something to be said for that. Right. So I figured that, like, okay, high skill, great players, like everybody loves watching McDavid. Everybody likes watching Makar. Like these guys don't need to be talked about because they're universal. Right.
You even called my list a little basic when you first
did. Well, because when the list that I saw had those names like on there, like pretty prominently and stuff, like you had more than 3 names on there and they were on there, and I was like, that's a pretty basic list, RJ. Those feel universal. So I tried to pick guys that I specifically enjoy watching, right? Like they match what I think hockey should be or what excites me about the sport of hockey, because obviously McDavid excites everybody, right? Like that's not asking, if you're asking me, or you asking everybody what they want to see. I think this is, you're asking me. And so that's why, like, even a Sidney Crosby's not on this list for me. I guess I will say that I did throw one joke answer on here, and that is Mason Marchment, just because as we talked about when Kraken played Dallas those couple games, nobody is more cursed, and there's an element of me that does love following Mason Marchment around the ice when he's playing, just because you're going to see him do something that's going to result in something very positive for Dallas, and then it's going to fall apart at the last minute every single time, and it never gets old. It's just entertaining. But yeah, trying to pick the guys that were, really special to me, and the guys that I really, focus on tuning in to watch specifically. Starts off with Sasha Barkov. And I know obviously he's a good player, top tier player in the NHL, all that stuff, won the Stanley Cup last year, but I don't know that everybody would say his game is the most exciting game. But I think he is the most prototypical two-way center that the game has today. I think he has taken over that crown from Anze Kopitar as far as being the guy that can be a 30-goal scorer on the one side and then just be the absolute shutdown playoff performer that you need on the other side of the ice. And I just think Sasha Barkov is incredible, and, in theory, I think every player should model their game off of that style, and try to become that player, because in the Stanley Cup playoffs, that player ends up winning Stanley Cups more often than not. So Sasha Barkov there. Next one, and here's where I'm really starting to go off the board. Phillip Danault. Okay. Nobody's going to say Phillip Danault is fun to watch, and I understand that. But you know what? He is fun to watch for me specifically. Obviously, I like two-way centers. Everything I just said about Barkov, I could say about Phillip Danault. I think he's the ultimate middle six version of what every centerman in the NHL should be, where it's slightly more focused on defense and more shut down. And in the offensive zone, you're going in hard on the forecheck, and you're just trying to shut down the other team's breakout more than you're trying to score. But there's just something about the way that Phillip Danault goes about it, where there's like, it's calculated, but it also feels last second, right? The way that he can just disrupt what another team is trying to do when they're trying to break out the puck is unlike anybody else, because he has the closing speed to get in those lanes at the last second. It looks like he hasn't made up his mind about where he's supposed to be going to try to disrupt the other team until it's the last second. And there's just something weird about it that just, it makes you think like, okay, this other team's going to get going, and then just out of nowhere, Phillip Danault is there, and he just stops it dead in its tracks. And it's just so much fun to see that for me. I love watching him. And then I love the personality too, and what he was able to do with Montreal on their big run and everything. Like, he's such a fantastic player.
So I think we're starting to notice a trend here, Dylan, and maybe this explains why, as I try and convince you that the Montreal Canadiens this year and their brand of, winning games 6-5, whatever, like, that's not fun. No, that's not fun. You like to see boring shutdown centers.
Well,
that's
you know what? I blame my parents for introducing me to the NHL in the mid to late 90s. Because that's what hockey was, baby. It was 2-1 games at most.
Hook, clutch,
that was
grab,
if you were lucky.
flood the ice.
Yeah, if you were lucky, you saw 3 goals in a game. And then the last player I have is unfortunately a Vegas Golden Knight, but that's Shea Theodore, who is, for my money, the most fun defenseman to watch in the National Hockey League, because he does have the skill to go out there and be a great offensive player, just like any of those top defensemen. Zach Werenski, maybe not a Cale Makar level skill, but like Zach Werenski, Brent Burns, any of those guys. But you're always questioning whether or not he has that skill, because he's gonna go full 200 feet carrying that puck, but the entire time it's gonna look like he's flying by the seat of his pants, and it could all come crumbling down around him at any second. But it never does. But just that edge of your seat, like, is he's going to try to weave through four defenders here. Is he really going to be able to pull that off? And then by the time he gets through the third one, you're like, okay, he's got this. And then the next thing you know, he loses the puck, but then he gets around the fourth guy and picks back up the puck and has his scoring chance. And it's just one of those, like, from an entertainment standpoint, he's just right on that edge if he has enough skill to get it done, but not enough skill that you're confident he's going to do it. And for me, that's the sweet spot.
Okay, so you like your fun, you like your chaos, but just from the defenseman. I see how this works.
I guess so,
now.
Yes. Defensemen should be the scorers out there, and then centermen should be the shutdown guys, right? Like, that's how hockey's supposed to be, y'all.
Yeah, defense scores, forwards play defense. Come on, that's how it works.
That is how it
But
works.
I'm glad that you had Shea Theodore on this list too, because if you go back, I mean, actually, everyone, please don't go back on YouTube and find that old video from when we were very new to this and still like very raw and everything. But appreciate all those of you who've been supporting us since that time, where we had our old ECH debate and we were talking about if you could just clone players and you have a 5-man team of anybody, which player would we pick? And I remember I went with 5 Brent Burnses. I thought that
Mhm.
would be ideal. And you went with 5 Shea Theodores.
Yeah, I did. I might tweak that now to 5 Sasha Barkovs, but it's those two guys for me, I think.
Interesting. You go Bark. I'd probably still stick with the defenseman. I think I'd go Kill McCarr.
Defenseman makes a lot of sense. Like it makes more sense to go there, but like you telling me if the Florida Panthers were like, Barkov, we need you to play defense. All like 6 defensemen got hurt. We need you on the back end. He wouldn't like go out there and be able to munch 30 minutes of a playoff game.
Could do it. No, I think that'd be an okay option. Like I think he'd be all right, but I'd still go McCarr. And hey, just wait for a couple years, Dylan. I'll go 5 Zeev Booyams.
Okay.
And you might have to admit that I'm right.
Maybe. Look, fantastically skilled player. We'll see if it works.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for that question. Dylan and I definitely had a lot of fun.
That was a fun question.
With that one. And next question here from Hi. Hi, guys. Mailbag question here. Is the KHN Kraken Hockey Network biased towards Matty? I noticed they often mention how good he was in game, but while watching said game, I didn't notice anything notable from Matty, while other players that to me were more notable are barely praised. I appreciate all you guys do for the Kraken community. Thanks. So thanks for this question here, Hi. And Dylan, you want to take the first stab at this?
Yeah, I will say this. Look, Kraken Hockey Network, biased in favor of all Kraken players. So in that sense, yes, they are biased in the favor of Matty Beniers. I will agree with that. As for the rest of it, look, I think you could then say that I'm biased in the favor of Matty Beniers or anybody else would be. That when we talk about him, he does so many of the little things right when he's out there, right? I mean, what really is special about his game, why he is the definitive 1C on this team, is he does a lot of things right, back checking in the defensive zone, through the neutral zone, breaking the puck out of the defensive zone. And these are not exciting things to watch, unless you're me, apparently, right? Like he's very much in the vein of a Barkov or
Yeah, it seems like
Philip
something you
Deneau.
would love.
Well, and that's why I talk about him all the time, and why I feel like I would very much be also accused of maybe being biased and pumping Matty's tires during games when it doesn't necessarily seem like it should be, because these are the aspects of the game that I really appreciate, and they are the aspects of the game that really do make a difference, especially when you're more competitive, when you get into the playoffs, stuff like that. Those are the aspects of the game that really, really make a difference. And I think that they should be highlighted and talked about more. And I do think, just like the analysts on KHN or me sitting here or you sitting there, RJ, one of our jobs kind of doing this and being these talking heads is to promote those things and highlight those things that these players are doing that are not necessarily obvious to the casual viewer, but help a casual viewer learn more about the game, learn to appreciate more about the game, and learn more to appreciate the guys on the team like Matty Beniers, who is a truly special, gifted defensive player. But you're never going to hear about that unless we all kind of really decide to talk about it, just because points talk, counting stats talk, being, top guy in the entire National Hockey League like he was last year or whatever at getting the puck out of the defensive zone. It's going to sound like you're biased for bringing that up because it's like the least sexy thing you could bring up when talking about a hockey player, but it's massively important, and it deserves to be talked about.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where you only notice it when it's being done wrong. I think for a lot of the, for helping out on the breakout, right? Matty Beniers could help with, 7 or 8 breakouts in the first couple periods of a game, and it goes perfectly. Get the puck out of the zone, get it out of danger. And it just looks like nothing. It looks like it's supposed to look, right? You're supposed to get the puck out of your own zone, but you don't see the alternative. where, maybe another player kind of turns a puck over somewhere and it's a scoring chance against or a goal against. And so it's the kind of thing that really you only notice it when it does go wrong. And with Matty, it so rarely does in the defensive zone. And so I think, on Kraken Hockey Network, they're trying to show that. And I think like Allison Lucan does a fantastic job with numbers, trying to quantify those things that you see. And so that might be, what you're seeing on the broadcast, where, you talk about zone exits and he had this many successful zone exits, controlled exits, things like that. And, it's again, kind of hard to quantify if you're not looking at the video of him doing it over and over again. And they don't really have time to show you, well, look here, we're going to show you the 8 successful zone exits he had and where nothing happened because he was doing his job. But, that's the kind of thing that does happen that they point out.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough spot to be in, but it's one where, a player, especially a player who's that good, and the fact that, Kraken, we've talked about this before, right? They lack a star player. They don't have guys that you would say, wow, this guy is top 3 in the league at this. Matty Beniers is top 3 as a defensive center in this league. And the stuff that he does in the defensive zone. That was like the whole thing with the whole Matty Beniers is good, actually, series that we had last year, was just pointing that out, and the fact that he was up there with guys like Connor McDavid when it came to controlled zone exits and those things. And so it's just about kind of hyping up, like, look, Matty Beniers is at an extremely high level, elite level, like top percentage points in the entire league level at doing this stuff, and wanting to give him, the credit he deserves for being at that level in the top league in the world.
Yeah. And finally, too, I don't want to be dismissive of your question here, too, because I think it is good to approach a broadcast with some skepticism, right? Because as Dylan said, they are biased toward every Kraken player. That's kind of what
team
the
employees.
They're team employees, right? That's part of their job, is to be, biased in favor of every Kraken player. And so, whether a player is playing good or not, I think, they'll have some incentive to try and point out the good parts in a player's game. And I think, as a fan, it's good to approach that with some skepticism. But I really do think, in Matty Beniers' case, there is a lot that you don't see that he is, that's not obvious, that leads him to be a better player than maybe some of the flashier guys that you'd notice more readily. But thank you for the question, Hy, because I think it allowed us to really dive into some of the nuance there. So next question here from Kevin. Haven't looked recently. How are young offensive defensemen looking right now, Dylan? I know you recently, this is the extra week, kind of helped you do some research on some of the young guys here. What do you have to say on that one?
Meaning like in the draft or for the...
I did there. It was that is the question. How is our young offense defenseman looking right now? And I mean, maybe a Riker Evans. I was trying to figure out what exactly.
No, I think they just mean in the system. And I talked about some guys earlier. They're more like the two-way guys. Maybe Caden Price and Alexi Bernier are going to be more two-way defensemen. They're more well-rounded kind of guys. But as far as like the pure offensive defenseman, right? Tyson Jugmouth. And what he's been able to do with Portland. And he put together a fantastic year in Portland, as expected, put up the big numbers there with them and what he was able to do. And obviously they're in the second round series right now with Everett, and 2 points per game right now in the playoffs. He's really been helping drive the bus for Portland on the back end. 15 assists through 9 playoff games right now. He's been stepping up big when it's mattered the most. He was better than an assist per game this year with the Winterhawks in the regular season. He's really driving offense. I've really come around on him in a big way this season, and really that started in training camp. I liked what I saw from him in training camp. The rookie games that were down in LA, I really liked what he was able to do, and I could see that, he is a guy that can drive offense and possession for an NHL team. And what I think is really important to note with him versus just maybe even a Dragicevic or any other offensive defenseman, he does it through the system that the team wants to work in. So if that system wants him to skate up the ice and go through the neutral zone carrying the puck, he can do that. If it wants him to make a big stretch pass from his defensive zone and let the forwards do the work entering the zone, because that's the system they're running, he can do that. And so I think it's really impressive to me. Just it speaks to his hockey sense, his awareness, his hockey IQ, that he's able to really adjust his game to fit whatever system he needs to run. And seeing him in those different systems with the Kraken earlier and then with Portland now, that's been really impressive to see. And the fact that there's just no drop off in his ability is, I think, also really impressive. Defense needs work. as it does with all young offensive defensemen. Defense needs work, and that's where the big hiccup is with him. But that offensive work that he can do is really impressive within the various different systems. Dragicevic, it gets traded to Prince Albert, goes through the season there, puts up the points that he puts up, but all of my concerns are kind of still there with him. I guess this is my biggest problem with Dragicevic is it feels like he's back to where he was when he was drafted. Because if you follow the prospect chats and stuff that I talked about last year, it felt like in a lot of ways he regressed last season, where he was maybe trying to work on the defense, but he wasn't making a lot of progress there. And then his offense suffered. It felt like this year was just him getting back to being himself and just being that pure offensive guy. But I didn't see the growth that I kind of wanted to see, especially now that we're D+2 season with him. I'm still looking at him and going, where do you fit in at the NHL level? Like, how does this work actually? And by now it's one where I would hope that I would have like more of an idea of what situations and role he could have for the Kraken one day. And I just unfortunately don't have it.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because I've always enjoyed watching him at the dev camps too, because he's so fun playing with some of the better skilled prospects too. Because that vision, especially in they do the 3-on-3 scrimmage every year, and just in that 3-on-3 setting, fantastic. I love the vision. I love the skating, but that it is unfortunate to hear there. But next question here from Dave, who always has very kind words for us, but I'd like your thoughts on what y'all would like to see our boys work on in the off season to help build their game. Maddie, Shane, Riker, Capo, and Yanni. So that's 5 names. That is a lot to get to, but if we kind of do a quick bullet points here on what we'd like to see each of those guys work on.
Yeah, and we'll go quick because boy, an hour melts away, RJ.
Sure
an hour in, it's crazy. All right, Matty Beniers. What does Matty need to work on? I think continuing to work on adding weight, adding muscle specifically, and working on developing those interior skills. He's been going to the net a lot more here recently, and this is really like recent as in like the last month, maybe a month and a half, but I feel like his production has really taken a step forward because of it. And the danger level, because that was a line since Capo Caco was added to Matty's line, they've been able to be in the offensive zone a lot, but I haven't necessarily felt like they've always been dangerous. But now that Matty Beniers is starting to go to the inside, that low slot, those high danger areas, they feel infinitely more dangerous. So just him being able to work on bulking up a little so that he can win more of those battles in close, that's the thing for Matty. Same as always, though.
I was going to say, it's the same thing we always talk about, bulking up, which again, I'm not holding my breath on that one, but also the thing I always say too, I think the last 2 years, right, is varying the shot selection a little bit more and getting more confident with his shot in different places than the normal spots he likes to put it.
Yeah, I feel like he's making progress there too, but yeah, there's more to be
made. We just don't see it often enough.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Shane Wright, this one's easy for me. Just get aggressive, bud. Just admit that you're skilled, that you're one of the most skilled guys on this team, perhaps the most skilled offensive player on this team, and start acting like it. Like it's really just a mentality shift that I feel like we need to see from Shane Wright, where he's going to start shooting the puck more, because he still doesn't even have that many shots on goal. That's why his shooting percentage is at like 20%. It's because he's barely shooting the puck. You got to shoot the puck, bud. Like, you have a great shot, use it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for Shane too, there's that mindset, but also, maybe study up on, because he's going to have a top 6 role next season, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think, kind of study up on playing against better opponents. And I don't know how, it's tough because really the best way to do that is reps in season. And I would have liked to see that more from him down the stretch, but maybe watching film too against some of the league's top players and seeing what guys do in those situations can help him as well.
Yeah, I'm just hesitant because then he's going to focus on defense again, RJ. He does that too much. He's trying to be a complete player too much. This team specifically does not need him to be a complete player. You have Matty for that. You need him to have more than 91 shots on goal, which is what he has now.
Then go practice against some college or junior kids or whatever, and just take over, Shane.
Yeah,
no mercy. Put up 9 goals in this scrimmage. Join a beer league scrimmage and just go to a pickup skate and just put up 20 goals.
Yeah, I'm just saying it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
It'd be the natural continuation of the fourth line Shane Wright that we're seeing right now.
It would
just
be.
Drop even further, get more aggressive.
It would be. Go play in the Oops All goalie game, but as a skater.
There you go. just dominate. Yep.
It's the empty nets. You can move. Nobody else can move or play the puck. Like that's, just build up that confidence.
Yep. All right. So Riker.
Riker Evans, learn to trust yourself again. I think that's the big thing, because that's been the plot that has been lost in the second half of this season for Riker Evans, is just learning to trust those instincts that you have to have. Otherwise, look, if they want you to be on a pairing with like a Brandon Montour type, it seems like the team wants him to kind of shift his focus away from offense to being more of a two-way guy, or even the defensive one on a pairing. Then if that's the case, then he needs to really kind of work on the defense and stuff, because that's just not who he's been before.
Yeah. And I mean, Dan said it too. He needs to remember what makes him good as a player and just kind of get back to that. And I think the offseason to refresh will probably help him.
Yeah.
Capo Caco.
Capo Caco, it's probably just like take a minute, breathe, because you got traded mid-season. I'm sure that like settling in Seattle, like officially and everything, would be good. I don't know that there's anything like super obvious for Capo Caco that I want him to totally work on, because I already feel like a lot of the stuff that you would say about him, he has been working on for the past several months, right? Like you're starting to see the skill game more and more kind of creep out for him focus more and more on the offensive zone, which is not what he was doing in New York. Like he looks like a visibly different player than who was playing for the Rangers last season and earlier this season and everything. So I guess in that sense, it'd just be a continuation of kind of having a more offensive mindset and remembering those things that made you a second overall pick.
Yeah. I mean, 3 words just kind of came to mind. Keep it up. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. And like you said, get settled into Seattle. And then finally, Yanni Newman.
Yanni Newman, obviously the skating needs to be worked on. That's probably going to be the rest of his career. The skating could always be better. But I think that the skating needs to keep getting worked on. And then at some point he'll need to start working on like the ability to defend coming back through the neutral zone and into the defensive zone. Wasn't really something that he did much at all as a member of this team during the 12-game stint that he had. Not that anybody was expecting him to, but in the long run, that's what you're going to need to do. I would have said like focus on playmaking, creating more, but he started to do that in the 12 games. Like
he did. His vision was impressive.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think like long term, it's just all the standard stuff that like a middle 6 winger it needs to work on. Any 20-year-old would need to work on.
Yeah. And I know the question was off season, but I just, the playoff run too, that's going to be huge for him. Being an impact player in a playoff run at the pro level in North America, that's going to be the most important thing I see for him. So now moving on to some women's hockey, which I'm always happy to get questions about this one from Ethan. If Seattle gets a PWHL team, which is still waiting on that announcement, but it still seems likely. What would you each go with for their mascot and or branding?
It's a tough one for me. I don't know. Yeah. I haven't put a ton of thought into this either. I really have no clue.
I had a hard time with this. I really had a hard time trying to.
The thing that makes it hard is trying to stick with the other, like the kind of the style and naming conventions that the rest of the league has utilized, which is the thing that makes it the hardest, right? Because you and I have talked about this in the past. It's kind of some interesting names that they went with for the other teams in the league. And so maybe less obvious choices than were being floated back, during the inaugural season when none of them had team names. So that kind of gives me some pause.
Yeah, and I mean, Sirens is already taken. I know that one was suggested a lot when we were thinking about this a couple of years ago. But so that's off the board. That can't be anything. I think the biggest takeaway for me, and I talked with my wife about this because she's a big PWHL fan. I was kind of curious her take on this, and I think you'll agree with me on this. Did we talk about it when we talked about the announcement? We wanted the branding and everything to be distinct from the Kraken. Yes. We did not want it to be Kraken related at all. So I'll stick with that. I mean, some ideas, because I want to give you some ideas. I don't know. I like Sea Lions. I thought that could be cool, but I don't know, for a women's team, if that works as well. But I've always liked the kind of Seattle Sea Lion type branding. One thing I do hope they go with, because I want them to go with a different color scheme than the Kraken. I don't want it to just, look like Kraken jerseys. I want them to go with the salmon and light blue kind of branding like the NHL to Seattle had. Mm-hmm. I still love that color scheme.
Kind of like the Ballard soccer team.
Does Ballard FC use that?
Yeah, I mean they use
more of an orange.
Oh, I thought it was. It's like maybe an orange, maybe a salmon.
Yeah, no, because they have, I mean, their main color is like kind of this like off-white, like kind of thing, but it's orange. It's the different layers of
Okay.
like it's they have yellow, orange, and then like a kind of a red. So no, not like that. I'm talking like NHL to see. I mean, like not NHL Seattle, Seattle NHL.
Yeah.
NHL Seattle. I've always mixed those up
Yeah.
from before. The branding from before the Kraken name was announced, where it's just kind of that red salmon color, but then with the light blue. And you do then have the ice blue that you could kind of have in common with the Kraken,
Mhm.
but the overall feel looks very different.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly in favor of that. I think a fun color scheme that's obviously different from the Kraken as well is I'm on board with. I think that would invoke PNW without being like we're lime green and blue like every other PNW team, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that
I think it's a
would
be
be
a good way to
important.
stand out.
Yeah, would it, call the team the Sockeyes?
Well, that I was just about to ask you about the sockeyes or the fish concept. Like, it's okay.
It's
I don't
fine.
know.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt about
Again,
it pre
it
Kraken
doesn't
announcement.
it
Like, it's
doesn't
fine.
it doesn't match anything else in this league, and that's the problem.
doesn't.
Like every idea I have doesn't match with at all how this league has named teams so far, and that's the big thing. Like even Sea Lions, that would be the first two names, like two-word name in this entire league. Like
Yeah.
they've seemed to really kind of just they want 1 to 2 syllables at most, right? Like that's
Yeah.
all you've got.
Well, I mean, Cascades, but like then, if there's a Vancouver team, does that kind of complicate it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we talked about this when we did like our big deep dive into the PWHL and the idea of Seattle expansion and stuff. Obviously, it still seems like fans most want the freeze, right?
Yeah.
It's close to Minnesota's Frost, though.
It's too close.
I
think
don't
that's a
think that you
problem.
can do it. That's the thing. Like I said, it really felt like anytime I was trying to come up with stuff, it felt like I was really hamstrung by trying to match what the rest of the league has done and assuming this organization will be owned by the league the way all of them are. I just don't know that they wouldn't kind of stick with their, more simplified, we'll call it, naming convention.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. I'm looking at like these off the board ones from when the Cracker grunge.
Yeah. I mean, like there is more off the board stuff, but like I would say like look at the names in this league, right? Like they're easily they're just I don't know. And I've always been consistent on this. Like I think the one that's the most like out there would be the Scepters.
Yeah, probably.
Otherwise,
yeah, and even
Boston,
then,
Boston Fleet, like the idea of a fleet, like it's just there. Charge, Frost, like Victoire, like okay, like that's.
I'm looking at the
cool.
13 that the Kraken registered, and like Rainiers was one of them.
Rainiers
so
would be cool. Like that would be
Rainiers
nice.
works. I mean, Emeralds was there. That'd be cool. We'd like that.
Yeah, definitely. That would help us for sure. But like even like the Rainiers, none of the teams in the league are that like specific to the geography of their area.
That's true.
Like it would be you would be breaking the mold, as crazy as that sounds. So that's where I just kind of got paralyzed when kind of doing this, because there's lots of stuff that I could think about, but none of it fits. I wanted something that would fit with what they go with, and I just don't know what it would be.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Ethan. And but believe us, we tried. We gave it a go.
Yeah.
Here. But I'm really curious what the community thinks. Please leave a comment and let us know, like, if you have any ideas for a team name and branding and everything, because I would love to hear. As always with these sorts of things, the community has way better answers than the two of us do. And so we'd love to kind of crowdsource this a little bit.
Yeah, we know that.
Find one that we would like to back.
I was going to say, going back to the early YouTube days, we know that definitively from our whole mascot and coming up with mascots for the Kraken and stuff. Like, this is not what we do at all.
No, Seagull supremacy. Seagull is still the best.
Name them the goals. Seattle goals.
Yeah. Maybe. Hey, if it means
again,
that Seagull can be the mascot,
you'd be picking more of a noun than any of the other teams in this league kind of do. Like a more specific noun.
Yeah.
Forest,
Seagull,
like
absolutely not.
No. But like just kind of sticking with the way the PWHL has gone, you'd be looking at something like the Seattle Forest.
Yeah, actually,
right? That's
it would be
that
like
sort
of
the
thing,
level that they've kind of been working at, and it works enough. But that's been the one thing all along that I've been, disappointed in the PWHL with. They do great work everywhere else. Products fantastic, easy to stream, all of that good stuff that we talked about, like when we did the deep dive into Seattle getting a thing, an expansion franchise. The names, man.
Yeah. So I would like to see it be a little like different, better, but I don't have anything specific there that I'm really willing to like get behind right now. So, but great question there, Ethan. A lot. I mean, we could have talked for an hour just about that. And then last two questions in the category of like just personal questions, us from Paul here. Can we get a Dylan and RJ background? I know you are both friends since you were kids, but I don't think I've ever heard the full story. Would love to hear how you became hockey guys in California. So, I mean, where should we start on this one? Because we have been friends since middle school. We've been best friends since middle school. Did we tell the full story? Did we?
We did.
Was that on Red
back,
Blair or was that on Deep Dive?
We did a lot back in season 1 and stuff. People were asking season 1 and season 2. There was a lot of that. So, we can tell the full story there. I was going to say, do you want to talk how we got into hockey first or how we met? Because those are two different things.
They are definitely two different stories. Yeah. Let's talk how we got into hockey first.
Okay. Well, mine, I kind of talked about it earlier. My parents are hockey fans, so I was just born into it. They're huge sports fans, so sports was just always on TV growing up. And hockey, I definitely developed an affinity for pretty early on. I wanted to learn to skate as soon as I could. My parents made me wait until the week I turned 3 to put me in skating lessons, but I wanted to from the beginning. I started playing at 4, so hockey was just always there because my parents are a fan, my grandfather was a fan, like it just goes back all the way.
Yeah. And then for me, my parents were hockey fans also. I mean, they were Sharks fans. And so I was born in the Bay Area, but then moved down to LA when I was pretty young. And my mom always tells the story when she was pregnant with me, they went to a Sharks game and SJ Sharkey, the Sharks mascot, rubbed her belly. And, that's, I guess, what did it. But growing up, it was a little later for me. I mean, really what got me hooked, we go to Sharks games all the time, as a kid. But when it was the 2004 like that playoff run for the Sharks and that Stanley Cup final, I was just glued to the TV watching that. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And that's what really got me into it. I'm like, I want to do that. I need to play that. And so I got some rollerblades. My younger brother actually taught me how to rollerblade. So I kind of got into it that way, played roller hockey till I was 18, then started playing ice. But that's kind of how I got into hockey. Being in California, there wasn't really much ice around that was convenient. But yeah.
Yeah, certainly not where we were out in the burbs, that's for sure.
Yep. And then as far as the background and how we met, so Dylan and I were both in the same homeschool program. And I mean, I'll just tell the story of kind of the first real memory I have meeting you, right? So this is one of my favorites.
The one that we did before, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell this story again. So Dylan and I were at there was an art contest the district would put on called Reflections, and our respective moms were there to set up for a little art gallery that they were going to have with all the students and everything. So we were there super early, and Dylan and I, we weren't really helping out. We were just kind of there to hang out. So as people started to come in, we were hanging out for a bit, and there was a girl who was also part of the homeschool program at the other side of the room. And I was talking to Dylan, and I let him know, like, hey, I think she's kind of cute, and Dylan's like, oh, you should go up and talk to her. I was like, no, I can't do that. I was very shy, awkward middle schooler. He's like, no, go talk to her. It's fine. I'll take care of it. Like, don't worry. We'll both go up together. I'll go with you. I'll make sure you're all right. I was like, okay, fine. Let's do this. So we walk up to her and Dylan just says, hey, my friend RJ has something to tell you.
First mistake was trusting me.
Yes. Oh, completely. Absolutely. And so I do not, to this day, I do not remember what I said. I don't
either. It didn't last long. The conversation.
No, it did not last long. I don't remember what I said, but then we just like walked away shortly after that. And I just like turned to you like, what the hell was that? What do you do? And you said, I don't know. I thought you'd come up with something good.
That's what I do.
Yeah, that is exactly what you would do. But we didn't know each other well enough at that point for you to know that there was zero chance I would have come up with something good. So I guess at that point I just decided, yeah, this guy's going to be my best friend for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
I don't know what I was thinking.
It doesn't speak a lot about either of our characters, actually.
No, it really doesn't.
But yeah, no, I don't know. That's the way I always kind of operate in those situations. I as a kid with significant anxiety and panic disorders as a child, it was always I just needed to be thrown into a situation and then figured it out because left to my own devices, I never would. And I guess I was just trying to do that for you. And yeah.
Yeah, it
Sorry.
didn't exactly work. It's okay. Actually, this is the first time you apologize for that.
It
I don't know.
probably is.
But then, from there we had the shared interest of sports, and we
Yeah,
hung out,
because
always
I was gonna
enjoyed
say, I
the-
think the first time we really like met each other and started to learn more was at a park day, which was
Mhm.
what the homeschooling community would have, just socialization. All the moms could get together and talk, all the kids get together and play. And I remember one of those, and you had a football, and we
Yeah.
played catch and stuff together, and it was like, oh, okay. It because we knew. I'm trying to remember if like we knew you were like the other hockey family or not at
Yeah, I
that
think
point.
I knew that
think we
you
like
yeah,
vaguely
'cause
knew some of that
at
stuff.
that point I was still like very into hockey, and
Was
so
that
like
post
anybody else
SeaWorld?
who would talk to me
Because
about
like I remember
Yeah,
like my mom and your
yeah.
dad talking on the SeaWorld trip because that was right after the Sharks had that like what was it, triple overtime game.
Yes.
See, the
Yeah,
timeline's
that
all like messed
Yeah,
up in
but I
my
remember on that
head.
SeaWorld trip, like we weren't close yet on that
No,
SeaWorld
we
trip, but I
weren't.
remember you were there. And I know
Yes.
my mom was like talking to your mom. So like that
Yeah.
was yeah. And so then I think we kind of got to know each other a little bit more. Then we realized, oh, somebody else I can talk hockey
Yeah.
with. And
Yeah.
so that helped. And then, at that point, like once we were friends, so, I'd go over to your house all the time and we would
Yeah.
have conversation. We'd watch a game and it'd be kind of a lot like this. And I remember your mom always saying, even back to like middle school, early high school, you guys got to like just bottle this, just
Yeah.
record this and put it out there and see what happens. And this was not our first attempt at doing that.
No.
The deep dive. There's some early videos of an attempted podcast that maybe we'll do as an Easter egg for people at some point. But yeah, those were bad.
They were bad.
But eventually we kind of figured out how to do it. And,
Yeah.
now here we are.
Yeah. Well, but see, I was just following my mom's lead. Just like go out there and start talking. It works.
Yeah. And it took that for us to get here. I mean, even you can, if you are really interested, you could scroll back on this YouTube channel and see how rough we were, even on the beginning of our second
Yeah.
attempt at doing something like this. So, that's, I think, ultimately the lesson. If there's something like that, just go do it, give it a try. And yeah, I guess walk up to that girl and just see if you can come up with something brilliant.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
I mean, nothing bad happened. You
No,
got
that's
me
true.
out of it.
I did. Yeah, that was
Out of the
worth more.
experience,
Yeah.
You're hoping to get her. You got me. It's fine.
Hey, that is the ultimate win. And then last question here. We'll close it out with this one from Chuck. Have you guys played together or against each other in either a youth hockey or adult setting? What was that like? And if so, were you on the same line or pairing? So unfortunately, we haven't in
No.
a game, have we?
No, that's on me because I haven't played like organized or competitive since I was elementary school aged. So that is definitely a me problem, not a you problem. We've done plenty of pickup game scenarios and stuff, in which case we're like always on the same team and we're always playing together, and it's just me getting the puck and then throwing it up to wherever you are.
Yeah, it's me just calling for it. Dylan, send it exactly where I'm going, and that's how it goes. So
Yeah.
hopefully one day that'd be fun to do. I know we just did a stick and puck at KCI together recently,
Yeah.
so you're getting into it. You've got the gear, and hopefully your back can hold up
Yeah.
enough to get out there on the ice more often. But it's definitely something we'd like to do.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so that's we've come to
We
the
did
end of the
it.
mailbag. We did it, Dylan. We got through the
An hour
question.
and 22 minutes. We did it.
Oh man, is it really an hour 22?
Yeah. No, but it's good. Like stuff like the end there. Like we needed to tell the story, right? Like we
Yes.
needed to get into the overnight SeaWorld field trip.
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff. Like that's
Yeah, we
what's
slept
needed.
over at SeaWorld. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Now I was with the belugas. Were you with the polar bears? Because those were the two.
No, I was
groups,
with the,
right?
I was with the
you
belugas
were the belugas too.
'Cause
Okay,
I
then we
remember
were
it was
probably on
under
opposite
in
ends.
like the water tank. Yeah.
Yeah. Not in the water tank, RJ.
Well, no. It's well,
Parallel to the water tank.
yeah. Not in the water
They did
tank.
not have us sleep
the water tank
underwater,
going?
everybody.
You weren't in the water tank.
I was
Come on.
not. And
I go to SeaWorld if you're not going to be in the water tank.
yes, no. I remember the belugas up to certain activities much of the night during that.
Yes.
That's
They
my
sure
primary
thought they
memory.
were. Oh, yeah. Very educational. You know what?
Definitely.
That's the purpose of a school trip.
Yep. Anyway,
All right, we could
yeah.
go on for another hour
No.
22 here.
But
Wrap
I
this up.
appreciate all the wonderful questions from everybody. Hope you enjoyed our answers and enjoyed the podcast as much as we enjoyed making these last 2 weeks. Next week, obvious podcast topic will be a retrospective on the season for the Seattle Kraken. We'll be through locker clean out at that point, I would assume. And we'll kind of have the information from that, what the players, what the coaching staff, what Ron Francis had to say at that point. We'll be able to go through all of that with all of you and give our takes kind of with the season in the rearview mirror for the first time. So looking forward to that as well next week. RJ, one more time, want to give a shout out to the law offices of Rico Tessendorf for sponsoring the podcast. Again, just like you would ask us, with the same freedom that you would ask us and trust in us to give you a good and strong professional opinion, which you all seem to do. I would say if you're ever in a situation where you would need the services of Rico, please reach out to him. Call at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com. You can schedule a free consultation. You can go in, ask those questions that you have, explain out the scenario, and get his expert legal opinion on where you should go from there. Really valuable stuff there, and it's free, that consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.